There's a lot to love with chapters 3 and 4 from Deltarune, to the characters, to the story, and the new lore that was dropped on all of us during both of the chapters. There's a lot to take in when these two came out a little over a year ago, and Chapter 5 being released semi-recently gave us similar aspects to discuss. Obviously, with the new chapters comes new music, and the game has bought us tons of new music while the tracks have at least one thing to love about them, even though there are some that don't inherently stick out as much as others. Of course, you have the really good tracks from both chapters, such as Black Knife, It's TV Time, Rooter Buster, and basically nearly every song from Chapter 4. I call most of the new tracks either upbeat or incredibly otherworldly, with some songs that can be incredibly depressing, which fit the end of Chapter 4. Through these tracks, however, there is one that sticks out to me among all of them, doesn't fit either of these, since I wouldn't really attach one singular adjective to the song. Glacier is my favorite Chapter 3 song, and by extension, one of my favorite songs in the entire game, because of everything that surrounds the song and how it feels given the context of what surrounds it. To get something out of the way before I talk about what I think the actual song conveys, among other things, I think it's important to mention its similarity to a song in Undertale, that being your best nightmare with the yellow soul of justice. If you take the song, loop the beginning, lower its tempo, increase its pitch, and mess with the song a little bit more, you get this. Which sounds very similar to Glacier. What does this mean in the overall part of the Weird Route and the song? In my opinion, it can go many ways, with Justice being represented by the yellow soul and Noelle's battle icon being yellow, but that's just speculation. Chapter 2 is basically just ice after all. It also shows Toby Fox has made maybe about 2 or 3 songs for the entire soundtrack and used some magic to make the rest of the songs sound incredible. Also, it sounds like Face Shrine from Link's Awakening. But that's all I have to say about that. With those things out of the way, let's now actually talk about the song. First things first, talking about the song, it feels rather repetitive, with the same melody constantly playing over and over again throughout the song, with it changing very little. Sure, it gets louder and quieter as the song progresses, but it doesn't feel like it's actually going anywhere. It feels very droning, exhausted, and how monotonous the entire song feels when you're playing the Sword Out in-game. Like playing the same gameplay loop over and over again just to get stronger. There's also a sense of isolation, not brought on by the music itself, but the area in conjunction with the music. It gives a sense of, am I supposed to be here? Or something along the lines of, I'm really not supposed to be here. The Ten Board section before this feels so lively in comparison, with sandy beaches, trees, and even other people to talk to. But this feels so odd by comparison, which adds to the feeling of being somewhere you're not really supposed to be. There's enemies roaming around and a white cloak to mitigate the feeling of isolation, but none of them say anything or do nothing but attack. The closest thing you have to another connection in anything is the text that appears throughout the area. I'm not really gonna do an in-depth analysis with this connection to the Weird Route, since that's painfully obvious and has been done by a lot more people than can do better than me, so I'll just leave it at that. I'll bring it up not to just draw some connections, but to highlight what I mean by a monotonous gameplay loop. Back in Chapter 2, when Chris teams up with Noelle, you have the ability to tell her to freeze every enemy in sight to get stronger, grinding to get to the highest level and get better skills and equipment to freeze enemies faster. During this section, you're guiding the White Cloak, who is a stand-in for Noelle, then using her to freeze the blue bird blocking the way and then progressing and getting used up at the end. This is an obvious reference to the Weird Route back in Chapter 2. The Sword Art in Chapter 3 reflects off of this. However, how you get there is what I want to talk about since it ties into the song as repetitive and draining as it is. Think back to any RPG you have played. Have you ever grinded in that game before? How exhausting something like that can be, and how repetitive, mentally taxing, and tiring it can be to use the same moves over and over again to kill enemies to get to whatever goal you're achieving. Maybe that be getting a better weapon or getting good skills, but the underlying aspect is getting stronger. That's basically my point with this song. It perfectly encapsulates how it feels to get stronger and kill everything in sight. It's incredibly draining on the player and the person it affects. You don't really think about what you're doing because, well, you're just fighting enemies and destroying everything in sight. It can get boring after a while. As an example, look how exhausted Noelle looks when you and Chris meet up with Birdley. She doesn't even know it's him at first, and asks Chris if they want her to freeze whatever's in their path. I really hope at least one person has come to the exact same conclusion as I have, since I like the idea of a song representing a feeling in RPGs that can get boring extremely quickly. And I like both the player and Noelle and how they represent that perfectly. I know it's based on a creepypasta with doing things that the player wouldn't normally do, but the idea that an RPG element being incorporated, especially something as tiring as grinding, is really interesting to me. You literally backtrack the other areas to find more enemies to kill and grind. Two of the most unlike aspects of games being mixed, so that the experience in the end does feel a little repetitive. Yet, that is the underlying point of what it feels like to grind to get stronger. To get a level like 99 in a typical RPG where the endgame you're maybe in the 70s or 80s. It did feel like I read a little deep into the song that's only a little over a minute long, but Glacier's a really interesting song. I mean, I wouldn't listen to it while walking around or anything, but for what it is, I think the song does a pretty good job at what it's trying to convey to what I think it's trying to convey. I've listened to the song so many times ever since it released, and I think although it has some presence in the community, I don't think it gets talked about too much compared to the other songs. However, that's most likely because the songs are just that good and can be talked about for a long time, rather than what I'm doing with one song that's fairly short. I really love the remixes that are on YouTube, and some of them will be in the description below, as well as just being background music. Glacier is a song that I think some people may have overlooked a lot, but I think for what it conveys, in my mind at least, is pretty telling of what it feels like to get stronger, possibly how it felt to Noelle. I think some people may think the song is not that deep, or something akin to that, but I think it's fun extrapolating meanings behind songs like these, even if the song is meant to be monotonous. A lot of songs in Deltarune do have some meanings behind them, and share parts of them that can shed insight into other parts that may or may not have been discovered. So I believe that you should at least take a second look at other songs for a minute or two and give it a second thought, even if the song is a little too short. Did I dig too deep into a song that possibly didn't have that much meaning behind it besides being used for one area and it has more meaning in a set place rather than an actual song? Yeah, but did I have fun dissecting it? Definitely. And I think that's good enough.